Hello everyone and welcome to lecture 73 of this series. This series of lecture is based on my book, Manual of Fluid, Electrolyte, and Acid-Base Disorders, a pathophysiologic approach to common clinical problems. I am Dr. Mohammad Tinawi. I am a nephrologist in Northwest Indiana. You can find the book on Amazon as an ebook, paperback, or hardcover. We are still on Chapter 10, Respiratory Acidosis and Respiratory Alkalosis. We continue in this lecture to discuss respiratory acidosis. We are going to discuss manifestations and management. Now, respiratory acid-base disorders can be either respiratory acidosis or respiratory alkalosis. Either one can be acute or chronic. We can only make a diagnosis of an acid-base disorder by obtaining arterial blood gases, whether it's metabolic acidosis or alkalosis, respiratory acidosis or alkalosis. In respiratory acidosis, we have primary hypercapnia, meaning CO2 retention. In other words, we have an increase in carbon dioxide tension in bodily fluids. The metabolic compensation is an increase in serum bicarbonate. So PaCO2 will go up, serum bicarbonate will go up. Now, this increase in serum bicarbonate is more noticeable in chronic respiratory acidosis. The treatment depends on the cause, but it is critical to supply the patient with adequate oxygen. In the previous lecture, we discussed compensation for simple acid-base disorders. To reiterate, in respiratory acidosis, the pH is down because it is acidosis. The mechanism is an increase in PaCO2. What about the compensation? For acute respiratory acidosis, for every 10 millimeter of mercury increase in PaCO2, bicarbonate increases by only 1 milliequivalents per liter. While for chronic respiratory acidosis, for every 10 millimeter of mercury increase in PaCO2, the bicarbonate in the serum increases by 4 milliequivalents per liter. There are limits for the compensation. For the acute respiratory acidosis, bicarbonate in the serum cannot exceed 30 milliequivalents per liter, and in chronic respiratory acidosis, bicarbonate in the serum cannot exceed 45 milliequivalents per liter. The clinical manifestations of respiratory acidosis depend on the severity and the rapidity of the onset. Acute respiratory acidosis can cause dyspnea, confusion, psychosis, headache, irritability, and anxiety. Seizures can be seen in severe cases. Now, chronic respiratory acidosis, on the other hand, can cause tremors, gait disturbances, memory loss, and somnolence. Hypercapnia is usually associated with hypoxemia, so the PaO2 is low. What is hypercapnic encephalopathy? Hypercapnic encephalopathy is CO2 narcosis. So you have progressive CO2 narcosis, and that results in a coma. When you have high CO2 level, you have vasodilatation of the cerebral vessels, and this increases intracranial pressure. In severe cases, you can even have papilledema. And in order to see that, you need fundoscopic examination. Now, patients with chronic hypercapnia can have sodium and water retention, especially if they have cor pulmonale. Severe hypercapnia can even cause cardiac arrhythmias, low cardiac output, and hypotension. What about the treatment? The mainstay of treatment is to give oxygen. So we have to address the cause of the respiratory acidosis. Now, when we're giving oxygen, it's possible to give it sometimes by nasal cannula. Some patients will need a mask. Some patients need CPAP. Some patients need BiPAP. Some patients need AVAPs, and some patients even need mechanical ventilation. The key is to address acute and severe respiratory acidosis right away and to take immediate actions, even if it means mechanical ventilation. In patients with COPD, we should not correct hypercapnia aggressively. So we have to give O2, but we do that cautiously. If we correct the hypercapnia aggressively and rapidly, we can have seizures, cardiac arrhythmias, and decreased cerebral perfusion. It is reasonable to lower the PaCO2 back to the baseline level. We don't want to have a hypercapnic coma. Some patients have more than one acid-base disorder. Sometimes you can have mixed metabolic acidosis and respiratory acidosis. Those patients might benefit from sodium bicarbonate. This remains controversial, but it is not unreasonable to give some bicarbonate if pH is below 7.2 or 7.25. Now, in that case, we utilize, like all pulmonologists do and critical care intensivists do, low tidal volume ventilation. Alkalemia can cause respiratory depression via peripheral and central chemoreceptors. So we don't want to go from a situation where we have respiratory acidosis to respiratory alkalosis because both are bad. We have to frequently monitor arterial blood gases and electrolytes. We have to replace potassium. We have to replace chloride and sodium if needed. Diuretics and corticosteroids should be decreased or discontinued. As you know, corticosteroids can cause respiratory muscle weakness. Diuretics can cause metabolic alkalosis. Patients with chronic respiratory acidosis are given oxygen, are given bronchodilators, are given systemic steroids if needed, and they should be advised to stop smoking, sometimes also use inhaled corticosteroids. Now, many patients will actually require a pulmonary consultation. We have to avoid post-hypercapnic metabolic alkalosis. In this situation, you've corrected the respiratory acidosis, but the kidneys have compensated for the acidosis by what? By retaining bicarbonate, and now the acidosis is corrected and you are left with the retained bicarbonate to cause metabolic alkalosis. Now, one way to avoid that is to make sure that the patient has adequate chloride and adequate potassium. Many pulmonologists use acetazolamide in the post-hypercapnic metabolic alkalosis. Acetazolamide is bicarbonaturic, meaning it increases the secretion of bicarbonate into the urine. It is chaluretic, meaning it causes hypokalemia due to loss of potassium again into the urine. So we have to monitor potassium frequently and replace it aggressively. If you're not familiar with acetazolamide, don't use it. Acetazolamide is given orally or intravenously. The dose is 250 to 500 milligrams 2 to 3 times daily. Normally, I put a limit. So I say 2 to 3 times a day for 3 days or for 6 doses. I don't continue that indefinitely. There was a study, I mentioned that when we talked about metabolic alkalosis. The Diabolo study was a double-blind study conducted in 15 French intensive care units, enrolled 382 COPD patients on mechanical ventilation. All patients had simple or mixed metabolic alkalosis. The active arm received a large dose, an adequate dose of intravenous acetazolamide, 500 to 1,000 milligrams twice daily. The results were rather disappointing. Acetazolamide did not change the duration of invasive mechanical ventilation, whether it was via endotracheal intubation or tracheotomy. That was the primary outcome. There was a small, though statistically significant reduction in serum CO2 by only 0.8 mol equivalents per liter in the acetazolamide group. Now, When you go from chronic respiratory acidosis to metabolic alkalosis, you are going to have depression of respiratory drive, and that's obviously bad. That makes weaning from mechanical ventilation more difficult. So what I'm trying to say, correct the respiratory acidosis, but don't turn that into alkalosis, because then you suppress the respiratory drive, and then it would be very difficult to wean the patient off mechanical ventilation. There was a study of 84 COPD patients, retrospective studies on mechanical ventilation, and post-hypercapnic metabolic alkalosis was seen in 20%. That led to increased dependence on mechanical ventilation and longer stay in the intensive care unit. Another study by Jeffrey showed that arterial pH is important prognostically for survival. He studied 139 episodes of acute hypercapnic or type 2 respiratory failure in 95 patients. Death occurred in 25% of episodes when pH was less than 7.25, as opposed to 7% of the episodes with pH over 7.25. In other words, respiratory acidosis is bad. Now I'm going to stop here. In the next lecture, we are going to commence our discussion of respiratory alkalosis. See you then.